We need to get Uyghurs their day in court. And right now, that simply isn't possible because, as you rightly explain, all of the routes to that are blocked by China. Now, this is important because countries will not act unless there has been a decent court judgment saying that that criminal threshold, that evidentiary threshold, is met. So the UK's policy for 40 years or more has been genocide determination is for courts, not politicians, is for judges. And we can't get to a court, so it means that the UK doesn't act. So what the Genocide Amendment does is it closes that lacuna. It says, okay, if you need a court judgment, there has to be a court to go to. So it would enable applications to be made to UK courts. And that would mean that the UK could use the word genocide and to act appropriately.
So what have been the arguments against it, and what have we heard from Boris Johnson?
We haven't heard anything at all from Boris Johnson on this. The Foreign Secretary and the UK government is opposed to what we're doing, and their arguments have changed quite a lot. We've now had 4 votes on the Genocide Amendment in various forms. Initially, they were saying this is a problem with the separation of powers, this idea that you have the courts deciding on trade policy. They didn't like that. So we slightly changed the amendment, and we made it so that all the courts would do is assess evidence. That's all they would do. And then the government and Parliament would decide how to use that information. But the government is still opposing it. And one of the reasons they're using is that they believe that if China, for example, were to be found innocent of genocide, it would be a huge propaganda victory for them. So that was the argument that they played this time round, not arguments that we find very convincing, but that's the main reason that they seem to be opposing this now.
And it's also been complicated by some of the politics that's been going on in Parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. Parliamentary procedure in the UK can sometimes be a real problem. And this time round, the government tabled what we would call a wrecking amendment, which basically means that you vote on their amendment rather than ours. So even though in the House of Lords, the Genocide Amendment passed with an almost unprecedented 171 vote majority, the Commons was not allowed to vote on it. So that was a very sad thing, but we get another shot at it in a couple of weeks' time.
What has been the reaction of Uyghur activists, including some of those here in Australia?
Well, they wrote a letter to the UK Prime Minister, and that included a number of Uyghur diaspora in Australia, begging the Prime Minister not to do this, to withdraw their wrecking amendment and to allow the House of Commons to vote on this incredibly important issue. You know, Uyghurs are saying, give us our day in court. If you're not going to act without a judgment, we need a judgment. We deserve a judgment. We deserve to have what is happening to us called by its proper name. And at the moment, those cries are falling on deaf ears, very sadly.
Has China had anything further to say about this?
I haven't seen much reaction from China yet, but I imagine that if we get a successful vote in the House of Commons, they'll be very loud about it indeed.
So explain to us what exactly happens next, and do you think the amendment will eventually pass?
So on the 23rd of this month, it comes back to the House of Lords. The government's wrecking amendment, which was in some ways a compromise amendment, passed. So we need to amend that. It gets very complicated, but we're going to put the courts back in the House of Lords. Then it goes to the House of Commons the following day. So it's going to be very fast. 24th of February is when we're expecting the vote. Look, I can't tell you whether or not we're going to win. And what I would say is that last time, if we hadn't had a wrecking amendment the other day, we probably would have done. But my view is that the whipping has been so strong, so brutal. This campaign has been so bruising for MPs, particularly in the new intake, that it's very tough to call. I think it would be close, but I hope that before then, the UK government will come to the table and recognise that this sort of fight that makes them look like the nasty party on genocide does nobody any service, and that we can find a way that works for all of us.
Luke de Pulford, thank you so much for joining us on The World.
Thank you.